My stepmother smirked, "This isn't your dad's house anymore," thinking she finally got the place after he passed away. So I just said, "You're right, it's mine now," then kicked her out and changed the locks. My name is Daniel Carter, and if you'd asked anyone in my hometown 10 years ago who would inherit my father's house, they would have said the obvious answer was his wife. That's exactly what my stepmother Linda believed. She walked around that house as if she already owned every brick, every picture frame, and every memory hanging on the walls. What she never realized was that my father had spent years quietly preparing for the day she would try to erase everything my mother had built. My parents bought that little white farmhouse outside Denver before I was even born. They weren't wealthy. My dad worked 12-hour shifts as an electrician, and my mom taught elementary school. Every extra dollar went into paying off that mortgage. They planted the maple trees together, built the back porch by hand, and celebrated every birthday, graduation, and Christmas under that roof. When my mother passed away from cancer, Dad nearly fell apart. For years, he lived alone. Then he met Linda. She was charming, polished, and always knew exactly what to say. She volunteered at church, baked cookies for neighbors, and called everyone dear. People thought she was wonderful, but I noticed little things. She always referred to the house as our investment, never our home. Whenever she talked about my mom, she'd quickly change the subject. When guests admired old family photos, she'd joke, "Those will probably disappear after I redecorate." Everyone laughed. I didn't. Dad always brushed it off. She doesn't mean anything by it. Maybe he wanted to believe that, or maybe he already knew something I didn't. I lived 3 hours away with my wife Emily and our 2 daughters. I visited every month without fail. I'd mow Dad's lawn, fix things around the house, and we'd spend hours sitting on the back porch drinking coffee. Linda hated those mornings. She'd interrupt every conversation. "If you boys are done pretending to be handymen, breakfast is getting cold." She never missed an opportunity to remind me I wasn't part of her picture-perfect future. One Thanksgiving, while Dad was outside grilling, she quietly leaned across the kitchen island and whispered, "You know, once your father is gone, you'll have no reason to keep coming here." I looked at her. She smiled as if she'd complimented my shirt. I decided not to tell Dad. He'd already buried one wife. I wasn't going to make him choose between his son and his second marriage. Instead, I kept my distance. Years passed. Dad grew older. He slowed down. Last December, he suffered a massive heart attack while shoveling snow. He never made it to the hospital. The funeral was heartbreaking. Friends packed the church. Former co-workers shared stories I'd never heard. I could barely hold myself together while giving the eulogy. Linda cried louder than anyone, at least in public. 3 days later, I stopped by the house carrying groceries and paperwork from Dad's insurance company. The moment I opened the front door, something felt wrong. The hallway looked different. My mother's paintings were gone. The family photos had disappeared. The antique clock my grandfather built was missing. I walked into the living room. Linda was sitting in my father's recliner with a glass of wine. Across the room sat 2 strangers measuring the windows. She looked at me and smiled. "Daniel, this isn't your dad's house anymore." I frowned. "What are they doing?" "Oh," she laughed casually. "I'm remodeling. New floors, new furniture, new memories." I looked around. "Where are my mother's things?" She shrugged. "Most of it's headed to storage." My chest tightened. "You didn't even ask me," she laughed. "I don't need permission." Then she stood up, walked slowly toward me, and said the words she'd clearly been waiting years to say. "You should probably stop showing up whenever you want." I stared at her. She folded her arms. "This house belongs to me now." The contractors quietly packed their tools and slipped outside. Even they could feel the tension. Linda continued talking. "I'm thinking of tearing down your mother's garden next week. Maybe put in a swimming pool." I felt sick. That garden was the last thing my mom planted before chemotherapy made it impossible for her to work outside. Every Mother's Day, Dad still placed fresh flowers there. Linda didn't care. She pointed toward the staircase. "And your old bedroom? It'll become my art studio." Then she smiled. "You can take whatever childhood junk you want before the dumpster comes." For a few seconds, I said nothing. I simply reached into my leather briefcase, pulled out a thick envelope, and placed it on the dining table. She barely looked at it.